You may realize that in recent weeks there has been talk that the European Union may move to list Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. It is not yet listed by the European Union, although of course, you know, we, the United States, do, other allies do. Within the European Union, you have already, it is both the UK and the Netherlands that do list Hezbollah. But the EU as a whole, 27 members, has not yet listed it for a number of reasons. They've listed Hamas, but not ever Hezbollah. And just recently now, you had the United Kingdom that formally petitioned the European Union to add Hezbollah to the European Union's list as well. Discussion on this will begin next month in June. And it seems that there is movement towards at least what it looks like perhaps listing what they sort of euphemistically call the military wing of Hezbollah. I'm not sure which wing that is or which half of Hassan Nasrallah that goes with, but that is the trend that they're talking about in any case. It would have to be a unanimous agreement. The European Union of 27 members, each one of them would have to agree to this to get Hezbollah or any portion of it on their list. The opposition up until now has come in large part from France, and the reason in particular is that France, as the former colonial power in Lebanon and Syria, in that region of the Levant, feared destabilization or further destabilization of Lebanon. Of course, the other reason is that the European Union has forces. The United Nations, UNIFIL, the interim forces in Lebanon, have been over there since 1978. And those forces comprise military contributions from literally several dozen countries. It totals around 11,000 troops, and another additional perhaps 1,000 civilians comprise UNIFIL. And its mission, of course, you know, had been in the beginning to sort of stabilize Lebanon, to expedite humanitarian assistance to the civilian population, to monitor what they called cessation of hostilities in Lebanon, and actually physically accompany Lebanese army military troops on patrols in southern Lebanon, which is really completely controlled by Hezbollah. But that was their mission, and they since 1978 have been engaged in this with these several dozen different countries participating. The problem, of course, is that they never actually took on Hezbollah at all. The 2006 war between Hezbollah and Israel, of course, intervened in some of these activities, after which a new resolution was passed in the United Nations to renew the mandate for UNIFIL and to bolster its responsibilities, part of which were understood to be the demilitarization or of all militias, as they said, all militias in Lebanon. Well, of course, this never happened at all with Hezbollah. If anything, the weapons deliveries via Syria and from Iran ultimately accelerated and increased over these years. Certainly in the post-2006 time period, weapons deliveries to make up for what Hezbollah lost in that conflict, especially missiles and rockets, definitely increased to the point where the estimate now of the number of missiles and rockets in the Hezbollah arsenal is well north of 50,000, and I don't know how we can actually have an accurate count for that. But so that part of the mission really never took place, and the dirty little secret, in fact, for UNIFIL is that the certain militaries, in particular certain European militaries of that mission, actually pay Hezbollah off in order that Hezbollah not attack them. There is a very cushy relationship between some of those military contingents and Hezbollah. in order that that UNIFIL fulfill its mission and impede Hezbollah and its terrorist operations or its rearming, but rather that the European militaries be safe in their mission in Lebanon. So all of this has gone into the reluctance, in particular of France, but of others, over the past years to not put Hezbollah on the European terrorist organizations list. Now, in Europe, Hezbollah is under scrutiny. It's not about Hezbollah elsewhere. It's about Hezbollah in Lebanon that they're afraid of. In Europe, it's known by all the security services that Hezbollah is active, has a widespread presence, is engaged in all sorts of illicit activities that include counterfeiting, smuggling, and other things like pre-attack casing and surveillance of targets, in particular Jewish and Israeli targets, and also mosques that are associated with Lebanese Shiites within Europe are monitored, and those who attend them are monitored to an extent, actually, that I think here in the United States would be surprising. We don't monitor the mosques in this country to the extent even that the Europeans do in Europe, which might be a little surprising to some. However, Hezbollah's activities over the years around the world, not necessarily in Europe, but around the world, you know, certainly have been well known. Its rap sheet prior to 9/11 include, of course, the United States and French embassies and military barracks bombings in 1983. Followed that up with the TWA flight hijacking. You had kidnappings all through, kidnapping and hostage situations all through the 1980s by Hezbollah, terror, targeted assassinations and murder. And then, of course, in 1992, Hezbollah attacked the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires in South America. And then in 1994 followed that attack up with another attack. Likewise, both of them, by the way, suicide truck bombing attacks. The 1994 attack against the Israeli or the Jewish Cultural Center in Buenos Aires as well. Both of these with high casualty counts. In some reports, it is said that these attacks were revenge for perhaps either the Argentinians pulling out of a nuclear agreement together with Iran, or possibly revenge for the assassination killing of a prior Hezbollah Secretary General, ascribed or attributed at least to Israel. Now, Hezbollah, Iran, and Al-Qaeda have been allied in a terrorist operations alliance, of course, since the early 1990s. They came together in Khartoum at the invitation of the Muslim Brotherhood president of Sudan, Umar al-Bashir. And in that early part of the 1990s, he invited all the jihadis of the world, really call it a kind of a jihad jamboree for all of the above. The PLO, the PFLP were there. Hezbollah was invited. Of course, Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri were in exile at the time in Sudan. And Al-Qaeda hadn't coalesced formally yet as the organization. It would be a little later on in the 1990s. But the cadre, the early members were there. And of course, as I said, Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri. And bin Laden went to the Iranians who were invited. And by the way, it was the entire top level of the Iranian government that was invited and that came to this meeting. The president at the time was Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani. The intel chief at the time was Ali Falahian. Who else? The IRGC chief, that's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps chief, Mohsen Rezai, who, by the way, is a candidate for the presidency of Iran in elections next month. He came, and others. All top-level rank of the Iranian government were there. And bin Laden went to the Iranians and he said, look, I really like what your Hezbollah guys do with explosives, and I wonder if you could have them teach my boys. And an arrangement was struck. Iran tasked Hezbollah, and specifically tasked Imad Mughniya, Hezbollah's terror chieftain for decades, to train what would become al-Qaeda cadres in explosives. And so over the next years, Mughniya set up training camps in Sudan, also in Lebanon and other places later. And thousands of jihadis, not just what would become al-Qaeda, but others too, passed through those training camps and learned how to do particularly big truck bombings that would bring down buildings, suicide truck bombings to bring down buildings, which is what al-Qaeda wanted. And so, of course, you saw the result of that in Khobar Towers in 1996, and then the East Africa embassy bombings in 1998. Each of those was al-Qaeda, but they were trained by Hezbollah in how to do those explosives and the truck bombs. That's the collaboration there. 2000, the USS Cole in Yemen, and of course 9/11. The 9/11 Commission report is quite detailed about the role not only of al-Qaeda in Iran, but of Hezbollah, in particular the role of Imad Mughniya. Imad Mughniya traveled, actually, from wherever he was, Lebanon or Iran at the time, to Saudi Arabia. He's the one that recruited the Saudi hijackers. Hezbollah's Imad Mughniya recruited the Saudi hijackers. It's in the 9/11 Commission report. He also helped train them. He also helped shepherd them around the Middle East on their final flights for training and other things prior to in the run-up to 9/11, the original 9/11. And the 9/11 Commission report also documents that what they call a senior Hezbollah operative was on various planes, various flights with muscle hijackers as they went around the Middle East. That senior Hezbollah operative, although not named in the Commission report, was Imad Mughniya. So they were involved in all of these things, and of course then 9/11. Now post 9/11, it's not as though they stopped the alliance. They did not attack the U.S. homeland again yet in the post 9/11 period, but they did mount attacks in many other places around the world, including 1995, the Riyadh National Guard headquarters, 96, we've talked about Khobar Towers, 98, Africa embassy bombings. There were also attacks in Casablanca and Istanbul and in other places. The Iranian government has played host to an al-Qaeda Shura Council inside of Iran since 9/11. Their liaison with Hezbollah is less defined or certain, but that Shura Council also has been involved in the attacks, for instance, of the Madrid train bombings in 2004. So all of these attacks, you know, are on the minds of the Europeans and their security services as they consider putting Hezbollah on the list in Europe. But I think probably what has galvanized them more than anything else recently are a number of recent events. And I recently wrote an article, it was at Gatestone Institute, about the resurgence of the Iran, al-Qaeda, and Hezbollah alliance. After 2008, in February of that year, when Imad Mughniya was assassinated, Hezbollah embarked on an attempt, at least, at retribution, at revenge for that killing, which, again, attributed to the Israelis, although it's not certain, you know, nobody's ever taken credit for it. And so they tried, but literally, I mean, really, without his presence at Hezbollah, Hezbollah was set back in its capabilities. It was not as capable even to take revenge for his killing as Hezbollah had certainly been over the prior, you know, 2 and 3 decades. And so they did not yet, if you want to call it, succeed or achieve that revenge. And that remains outstanding. They will still try to do that until they succeed. But that is one reason for the uptick, I think, in some of the attempted plots, at least since 2008. But in particular, even since 2012, last year, there seems to have been a decision taken, probably at the very highest levels of the Iranian regime, that Hezbollah should be reactivated and its traditional capabilities should be rejuvenated. Matt Levitt had a very good piece at the West Point publication, combating terrorism, I think is in the name. And he talked about the rejuvenation of the Hezbollah traditional tradecraft capabilities and the evidence that we're seeing for that, yes, in a number of failed plots that include European targets, or at least places in Europe, targets in Europe, as well as elsewhere around the world. So yes, those failed plots, but then as we move forward, a couple that were a lot more concerning. Now, since the beginning of 2012, you had attempted identifiably Hezbollah attacks, planned or plotted at least, in Bangkok, Thailand, and this was against Israeli diplomats, in Tbilisi, Georgia, and that was against an Israeli embassy staffer who actually found a bomb under her car before it detonated, thankfully. New Delhi, India, again, an Israeli diplomat's wife was injured with those magnet type of car bombs that they stick on the side of the car by a motorcycle and then run off. In Baku, in Azerbaijan, 2 Lebanese Hezbollah operatives were arrested for plotting, again, against the Israeli embassy. And then, of course, sadly, in Bulgaria last year, in July 2012, there was an attack that killed 7 people. This was an attack against an Israeli tourist bus in Burgas on the Black Sea in Bulgaria, and 7 people were killed in total, 6 Israeli tourists plus the Bulgarian bus driver. That attack really got people's attention in Europe, because this is the first time that an attack identifiably by Hezbollah went off in Europe. Europe thought that by its arrangement, by its hands-off attitude inside Lebanon with the UNIFIL forces, that it was going to be somehow exempt. It was going to be, there was some sort of a tacit understanding that they wouldn't get hit in Europe. Well, this erased all that. And of course, the drumbeat of all these other plots last year, which, while not in Europe per se, certainly showed an uptick in the tempo and the intent of Hezbollah to strike. And again, not striking at identifiably European targets, but looking for Israeli and Jewish targets in Europe. Now, the other thing that really caught people's attention in Europe, I think, was the arrest of a Hezbollah operative in Cyprus. And the trial has been going on the first part of this year. This operative, whose name is Hossam Yaqub, is a dual citizen, Lebanese and Swedish citizenship. But he's been an operative for Hezbollah since 2007, when he was recruited by Hezbollah. Now, the important thing about him is a couple of things, and we'll talk about the details of it, but the fact that he has, wrap it up, okay. The dual citizenship, the fact that he had a Swedish passport was important, that he could move in Europe and across borders. So quickly, his trial has revealed a great deal about what Hezbollah is up to lately. It shows an intensive level of professional tradecraft training. It shows building a careful cover story for this individual. He was already conducting pre-attack surveillance, casing, mastering communications codes, very complex and sophisticated tradecraft here. He was dispatched for the first time to Cyprus in 2009. Again, not arrested until last year, 2012. So for 3 years, he was performing essentially pre-attack casing and surveillance, one expects of Jewish and Israeli targets in particular. So I'll wrap it up here and say that these plots and this Cypriot case, court case, in addition to, by the way, the involvement of Hezbollah in sending thousands and thousands of troops into Syria, has really changed the minds and gotten the attention of many Europeans, and I think is part of why you see this turn in Europe taking this step that they had refused to take for so long before. I think the possibility is good that the Europeans will put Hezbollah on a terrorist list, but they'll probably try to finesse it by calling it some sort of a military wing, which is absurd, but that at least would be a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Very, very disturbing, of course, and it fits with other kinds of accelerations, not only of Hezbollah, but of other parts of Islamism that we're familiar with. Do we have any questions? Kyle, go ahead.
Kyle Scheidler, Endowment for Middle East Truth. Claire, you mentioned towards the end Hezbollah's involvement in Syria. and I'd always sort of been of the opinion that part of the Europeans' hands-off attitude towards Hezbollah had to do with their own internal immigrant populations, where Hezbollah had been very popular. Hezbollah and Hamas, you typically hear cries for them in Al-Quds Day protests in London and things like that. And lately, however, because of Hezbollah's involvement in Syria, the Sunni Arab Street has turned against them very, very hard. You have the UAE wants to designate them. So did that open the door for the Europeans where they feel they have more room now to maneuver than they did previous?
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. That is part of it. Of course, the Shiite representation among immigrants in Europe is quite a bit smaller than the Sunni one, but all the same, they're there, and it's a consideration for them. As I said, the security services are very aware of their presence and monitoring that. So that certainly is part of it, the population within Europe itself, but I think more so it had to do with their troops in Lebanon, and of course then now shifting opinion with Hezbollah's all-out backing of Assad.
We have time for one more quick question and quick answer, and then I believe we have one go to the order point. So let's switch sides here over there.
So we've been hearing that some possible al-Qaeda elements have been helping out with the rebels in Syria. So they would be on the opposing side of Hezbollah. Is there like a rift in al-Qaeda cooperation with Hezbollah?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. Things exist on various levels. And there's this concept, of course, within Islam and the Arab world, too, of balanced opposition. Me against my brother and I against our cousins, and so forth, concentrically building to a bigger conflict or opposition. And that's what you're seeing. At the micro level, Shiites and Sunnis have had at each other gleefully for centuries, and they always will. But at the higher level of that balanced opposition, you finally come to the macro top level, and that's Dar al-Harb versus Dar al-Islam. Dar al-Harb, of course, the house of war, the place where Sharia law, Islamic law, is not enforced. Dar al-Islam, the place where it is. And that is the level where you see Shiite Iran, Shiite Hezbollah, and Sunni al-Qaeda, all Muslim, all Islamic, jihad, Sharia, coming against the kuffar, the rest of the non-Muslim world. So, yes, these things go on at the same time, and they seem contradictory. I mean, think Spock, Star Trek, three-dimensional chess. It's kind of like that.